new survey finds Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is the least popular political leader here in Washington. The new Gallup poll shows the New York Democrats' approval rating is just 28%, several points lower than his Republican counterpart, Majority Leader John Thune. House leaders Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries, and President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. Schumer wasn't always Washington's least liked. His approval rating among Democrats was 76% 2 years ago. But since the so-called Schumer shutdown, that number has fallen to just 39%. Now some younger Democrats are calling for a change.
This is definitely a moment where this country wants new leaders.
Chuck Schumer's generation, Nancy Pelosi's generation, John Lewis's generation, they have so much to be proud of. It is time, though, for new leadership.
Do you think Democrats around the country think that Chuck Schumer should be the face of the future of the Democratic Party?
Power Panel, Alex Sawyer, Washington Times editor-at-large, and Sarah Mercer, Democratic strategist. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Sarah, let's start with you. Are Chuck Schumer's days as Senate Democratic leader numbered?
Yeah, it's been a really rough year for Chuck Schumer, and the numbers reflect that. Americans really want leaders who are focused on solving their problems, and Chuck Schumer just hasn't shown that he can do that. The shutdown fight was a perfect example of what regular people hate. It was a standoff that failed to result in anything meaningful. Healthcare premiums are continuing to skyrocket, and we're just faced with this conundrum in the country right now where Americans can't afford those high healthcare premiums, but taxpayers shouldn't be responsible for footing the bill either.
I'd like to show our audience a recent piece reflecting on Schumer's, quote, toughest year. It says another reflection of Schumer's unpopularity is that more members of his caucus are endorsing challengers to the Senate campaign arms preferred candidates in key primaries. The progressive wing of the party has backed different candidates in high-profile Senate races in Maine, Minnesota, and Michigan. Alex, what about all that?
Yeah, it does not look like a good sign for Senator Schumer. I think he needs to take a page from Nancy Pelosi's playbook and recognize that it's time for him to step down as leader, that his party wants generational change. Sarah mentioned the shutdown having a lot to do with his polling numbers going down. I think there's also been pushback from Democrats about his lack of getting behind New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani during his campaign. He refused to endorse him, and I know there was some pushback from the progressives in the party about that. And that's where the Democrats are going. They are moving further to the left in their candidate choices, as you just noted. What's interesting about that is that the country did not. In 2024, the popular vote obviously went to Donald Trump, further to the right. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for the midterms. I think the bad news for if Senator Schumer were to resign as leader is for Republicans, because I'm certain that the next leader would be more to the left.
All right. Then there's former first son Hunter Biden returning to the podcast sphere, defending his dad's decision to run for a second term while blaming the media for covering former President Biden's missteps.
He decided that he was going to run again. And then he ran. And then what happened is every little thing, every time he went up the steps of Air Force One, and if he used the short steps instead of the long steps, and if he stumbled when he was walking to the podium, and if he tripped over a word of a president that he was talking about he's talking about India and not Iraq, and every single thing became a New York Times level 2-page expose.
Despite Hunter's outrage, a quick look back shows several examples of the mainstream media praising President Biden's health and mental fitness.
He's very lucid, very well informed. He speaks quietly and a little bit slowly, but,
He's totally focused. He's very sharp, and the proof is in the performance.
But comparing that guy's mental state, I've said it for years now, he's cogent. Mm-hmm. But I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been.
One can understand a son defending his aging father, but do you see any evidence, Sarah, of the mainstream media being rough on President Biden?
Yeah, it's certainly understandable that Hunter Biden would want to defend his father, but there's just no denying that there were gatekeepers who were keeping the reality of President Biden's health from the American people, and that media coverage was uneven. And look, the reality and the result of that was that Democratic voters, we didn't have the opportunity to have the chance to have a real presidential primary. Mm-hmm. And that really, when that kind of information is withheld, that undermines trust in the entire process. From where I sit here in Denver, Colorado, it's very interesting. Over half of Colorado voters who, I think we're very much seen in this day as a blue state. Over half of voters are unaffiliated, which means that they don't really believe in the Democratic Party. They're not joining the Republican Party either, but they're choosing to remain unaffiliated. And it's in part because of what happened with President Biden, that there's just no trust that the parties are actually representing the interests of the people. And it should be the reverse. It should be the people who are really demanding and that the parties represent them. And the parties the Democratic Party needs to be more responsive for sure, or voters are going to continue to walk away.
If the mainstream media had been more critical and honest in terms of President Biden's health, would he have dropped out sooner, Alex?
That's a good question. I think that this kind of goes, the same conversation that we're having here kind of goes off to the DNC and withholding their autopsy report from the 2024 election. I think that there's a lot that we could tell that Democratic voters were frustrated that they didn't have the full truth about Biden's health situation. I don't know who is to blame for that, if it's Dr. Jill Biden or not. But obviously his debate performance in July, it spoke for itself. And then the fact that the Democrats didn't really have a real primary to replace him is truly unfortunate. And I think that that's why you're seeing a lot of dissent in the party. One of my favorite things, though, during the Hunter Biden interview was that his comments, actually, there was some pushback against his father's policies, specifically immigration. One of the quotes that I loved was that he spoke about how we don't want immigrants coming here illegally and draining our system and coming before heroes, those that serve our country. It sounded a little bit like Trump, a little bit of America first.
Sarah, I want to follow up on something she just said. What about the autopsy into what went wrong in the 2024 race? Is it a mistake that the Democrats are keeping that private?
I think the Democrats want to move forward, and the calculus there is that if they release the autopsy report, that's just another opportunity to sort of continue to look back and to stay in the past. And so, I think that's a really calculated move in order to try to move forward without continuing to, have this sort of expose on where we were and what happened.
Alex Sawyer, Sarah Mercer, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.